But then you watch a game like tonight and LeBron kicked his ass. He's not ready to be a top 15 guy, but he really, really, really gives a shit about every game. It's great. I love it. This is a long, sustained offensive excellence that when you watch it feels legitimate. We're not going to be nice. What do we care? We're just these, let's call it what it is. All right, we are live on YouTube. I wish my voice worked. It is 12:52 p.m. Sunday. Just watched the Cleveland Cavaliers outlast the Orlando Magic. We're taping the first part of the BS podcast right now. Ryen Russillo is here, aka Red Light Russillo. We are gonna dedicate this episode to Franz Wagner's trade stock, which took a massive hit today, Russillo. But let's start positive with the Cavs. It got dark there in the second quarter. I was preparing for this pod and I'm just on Trade Machine making up Mitchell trades. I'm looking at the Cavs salaries. I'm like, would they trade Mitchell and Jared Allen? Is Mobley available? Is Bickerstaff going to get fired at halftime? Fans are booing. It just seemed bleak. And then all of a sudden near the end of the second quarter, it started to flip. They're down 10 at halftime. And then second half took over. Did you think that was it for Cleveland at any point during that game?
No, not at all, because I just know Orlando's offense, especially on the road. And really, Paolo was keeping him alive, not so much with his shot making, but his free throws. So when it was 49-31, look, no matter who it is, unless it's just a complete mismatch, I feel like even as bad as games get, someone's going to make some kind of push. And this is why you have a Mitchell who, at his best, if he had qualified, I probably would have voted him all NBA this year. And even though I know he's not perfect, he can just take over games with his aggressiveness. And I thought he realized it. LeVert finally had a decent game. Strus showed up in the third quarter. And, you're probably trying to figure out if you could trade Garland at some point too. But it was 49-31. And then from that point on, and the final score is different, but it was 99-87 Cleveland, and a 12-point deficit for Orlando seems insurmountable with this offense. Over that time, Cleveland outscored them 68-38. So
yeah.
Was there a result from this series that was actually going to make you feel drastically different about either one of the roster questions?
That's a good question, actually, because the result I think here was that they didn't have Jared Allen in this game. And I just kind of like watching the Cavs more when they have one big guy instead of two, which I felt that way. I felt that way when Mobley was out there in the season and Jared Allen was the lone big guy. Just seems like when they have more space, they're more interesting. Mobley, I think he had like 5 or 6 turnovers in this game, but there was some rebounding, shot blocking stuff he did and shot intimidation stuff that I thought was pretty important. Like, I like how he played. He's still a little sloppy, he's still a little clumsy, he's still a little weird around the rim, and he still feels like a little bit of a work in progress. And when you compare him to people like Edwards and Paolo, who are just precociously dominating as alphas in these playoff games, he seems like super young compared to them. But yeah, that was the only result I had was, what do they do with Allen? Because if the Celtics wax them in round 2, does that really change that much for them? I think the Mitchell kind of needed those last couple games here, because I was looking back. He had 12 playoff games going back from 2022 through game 4 Orlando, where he was 21 a game, 42% field goal. He had 4 wins. He was 4-8 in those games. And then game 5, it felt like he got going. I thought that was an important win for them, because it really seemed like Orlando was going to steal that game. Game 6, he has 50. Today, he was awesome. And I feel like he's kind of reestablished himself as the asset that I think deep down we all felt like he was, but we hadn't seen it on this stage in a couple of years until this week.
I'm pretty sure the league, though, would look at him and go, okay, if he's available and he wants to re-sign with us, we'll take him, which I think was the debate about the New York decision and the Cleveland decision at the time. And we sit around and we talk about these teams and we critique them for some of the trades. And it's like, well, what are we supposed to do? Wait for the first team All-NBA guy? We're supposed to wait to be a perfect fit for him. So if Cleveland had been bounced, it would have been more disappointing, because it's a 2 years with the Mitchell Garland thing that I still think has questions. You're absolutely right about the Allen Mobley part, but to not have Allen as a possibility when he's 17-14 in the series isn't a good thing. But it makes it like, granted, he's not playing, so that means Mobley's going to be split with these guys. But it just was going to feel more disappointing if Cleveland lost game 7 at home. But we're going to be asking the same stuff if they get smoked by Boston. So whatever you think you were going to ask today, if they lost, if they don't beat Boston, and if it's a quick series, we're just going to delay the questions that we were asking today. And as far as Orlando, if they had gotten this one, it's like, okay, Paolo, check. Man, Franz, like he
Yeah.
needs to be a better two option. They need
Uh,
shooting. Maybe they need playmaking. Like they were going to need those things, even if it was a competitive second round. So sometimes the distance in the playoffs, like I think, tricks us into talking about teams differently. When I was just watching this one, I was like, every single concern I've had about either one of these teams is just evident, and then some team's going to win it.
yeah, that's a good point. I think the one difference though is if Orlando loses, they were playing with house money. It's a game seven. They had a lot of young guys in this series, like Suggs and Franz. I think were 3 for 25 at one point. And Garland on the other end wasn't playing well either. Like these game sevens, national TV, when the crowd gets nervous, like it's just a different energy and atmosphere. We've both been to game sevens. I've been to a lot of them, and it's just feels different from the moment you're in the building. I think where the stakes were higher for Cleveland was the way that second quarter was going when the crowd was booing. And it just was like, man, if they like lose by 20 at home in a game seven, what happens to this team? It felt like Bickerstaff's out probably the next day. Mitchell the trade start immediately. And then it's like, do we just keep two of Garland, Mobley, Allen? What do we do? It felt like an explosion for about 10, 15 minutes there. Part of the problem for Orlando is Paolo was putting up sight. Did you see him at the end when they showed him that close up? He was like, there's different levels of tired. I'm going to puke tired. Like they were showing him, he looked like when that stupid MTV challenge show that I watched when they're pushing the guys too far and they
Stupid.
just bend over and start puking. And it was like, is Powell just going to start throwing up on the court? Like that's how tired he was, but he was getting no help. So anyway, I thought it was a really dangerous half hour there for Cleveland that they fought off. Now, if they get swept by Boston, all the same questions get asked, but I don't think at the same level of intensity, right?
No, because in that one, clearly they're not expected to win, even though I thought this series was going to be pretty close. And you're right. If Cleveland doesn't get game seven at home with this group for the second year, because last year was a disappointment against New York. So
Yeah.
yeah, it means more to them, the outcome, to go ahead and get this win. But on the Orlando side of this, and you're always bringing this up, and there's just constant reminders. And I don't know if it's game seven, I don't know if it's being young and the first time through, but Franz and Suggs ended up 3 of 28 in this one. Franz
Oh,
is
I didn't know it got worse. I saw
No, it
the
got
3 and
worse.
25. Jesus, 3 and 28.
3 for
Oh,
28. Franz 1 of 15, 0 of 5 from three.
oh.
And I brought this up a couple weeks ago where when we really liked Franz, it was like, where's the hole in his game? Like the best version was, okay, he can put it on the floor. He's got all the size. He's a good defender and he can shoot it. And when you look at his college stats, like even if the scouting report on him was that you didn't have to respect the shot enough, there was still enough of a percentage there where you felt like it was going to develop into something on top of his free throw shooting, which is what scouts always look at. Like, okay, maybe if I don't love the 3-point numbers or don't love the way the shot always looks, like there's something to work there with. And it became evident there were just a lot of times in these games where Franz didn't even trust himself. And they even brought it up in the broadcast where he said to them, I think it was with Salters, where he's like, I know I'm a better shooter than this. It's like, well, you've got to have to fight through that doubt, because then he starts getting a little clunky with it and he's kind of just finding, like, he's going to the hoop, but you could see he was just really,
He's
really struggling with it. So then you go, okay, Suggs isn't making shots. He's not making shots. And
But
Paolo had,
Suggs wasn't afraid to shoot, which was the difference. Franz had a couple possessions, and you could just see it, especially if you've ever played basketball. You can see it in somebody's demeanor. It's like, oh, that guy doesn't want to shoot,
you
and
see
he
it all
just
the time in
didn't.
these games.
And Cleveland started sagging off him, and he was like, "Oh fuck, I still don't want to shoot. Hey, does anybody want to come over and set a screen for me so I can try to get to the basket?" It was pretty brutal.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how Orlando could ever win this game if you're like, okay, well, this is what the second and third options. They're going to shoot 3 of 28.
No, there was a
And
way for them to win though, Russillo. It was with defense. I think they win a rock fight, which is like if you were going to pick Orlando in this game, the over under I think got to 195. It went up after Jared Allen went out. Orlando was like +4. And if you're going to pick Orlando, it is like a 78-73 final or an 88-81. It's one of those type of games, right? The problem for them is Mitchell got going And then Strus out of nowhere became Miami Strus again for like 5 minutes, and he hit those three threes. Did 33 points in the third quarter. And that was what swung the game. But I think there was a recipe for Orlando to win where it was just ugly, and Paolo was getting to the line over and over again. Mitchell was 3 for 13 the first half, and it felt like he just couldn't get it going. And then that meant nobody on Cleveland was going to get it going. But then he got it going.
But this is why you pay Mitchell. This is why there'll still be demand for
Yeah.
Mitchell because, in the gossipy world of the NBA, there's not anyone that I've talked to that thinks that he would actually tell them, hey, I'm going to sign here. So all of this may
Yeah.
be delaying the stuff that we talked about at the beginning. But as imperfect as you can argue Mitchell can be, I've talked about like the downside of him being a little peak Westbrook lightish, where he'll just go like, I
Yeah.
got to do this all on my own. Well, sometimes you need that, especially when there's nothing from Garland. LeVert hadn't been good until this game. I mean, Garland, if they lose this one, then it turns into like a bad Garland summer. So, who knows? Although he had a really important stretch there late where he got to steal on Suggs after the inbound when the game still felt like it was in play. He then hits a shot, then gets a rebound. So, I'm
And he
reaching
and he
for like
was
peak
and he
Garland,
was
but
playing hard. I
he
can I make
does.
a Garland defense for 5 seconds?
I like Garland, so go ahead.
I like him a lot. And that broken jaw thing is like not a small thing if you're a basketball player and you're coming back from like a real injury to your face and you're a guard. And I just think it fucks with your head a little bit. Like I was looking at his stats. Like 2 years ago, he was basically 22-9 before the Mitchell trade, right? And then it's gone backwards, and now he's like a 17-6 guy. But I don't have questions about him yet. I didn't love how he played today, but I also think he had a really weird season. Um, the
He just
Mitchell
shot
one,
less too. I mean, he
yeah,
was taking even less shots in this series. So I think that's going
he
to
doesn't have
happen
the
once.
ball a lot.
Yeah, once
Yeah,
Mitchell
yeah.
decides, okay, I think the only thing like we need 8 Superman minutes, and Mitchell, even with the flaws, is capable of doing that in a way that there's just not a long list of players in the league.
Well, a couple things helped Mitchell in this game. I don't think Suggs was the Suggs from the regular season, really, since he got hurt earlier in the year. And that's not an excuse for Orlando because Mitchell made some great shots. But I watched Suggs this year and he was a better defender than he was, especially in this game. And they just every time there was a break, he was limping around. It seemed like he had like five different injuries. And I just think he was really banged up. The other thing was I thought Mosley really helped Cleveland with not using Isaac enough. I didn't understand the Isaac use at all. He put him on Mitchell for two possessions, I think at the start of the fourth quarter. And I was like, here we go. Where the fuck was this all game? And the first time they got him in a pick and Mitchell was able to get by whoever the switch was. And the second time he took like a bad 28-footer over him. But Isaac was doing that Bill Russell time machine thing. And I was like, this is how they get back in it. Just put Isaac on Mitchell for 5 minutes here. And then Mosley took him out. Mosley, I thought, was all over the map in this game. He played 10 guys. I just in a game seven, he might be the first guy that played 10 guys in a game seven in like 20 years. I'd love to see the stats on that. His rotations were all over the place. Franz didn't have it at all. And he just kind of kept putting the offense in his hands. I just didn't understand the coaching.
The second unit was so good a few games ago where I thought it like changed the game for
Yeah.
them. I think that was game 4. And maybe there's part of it where he felt like, okay, that was worth it. Maybe he's afraid of putting Isaac straight up on Mitchell and then they just screen him and now Isaac's away from everything. And I'm just trying to figure it out. But like
Yeah.
in 50, I'm trying to think here, the last 61 minutes, Isaac made 4 shots. So for an offense,
Right. You can't have him and Franz out there at the same time. Right. With
right? So
Suggs also missing everything. But maybe the way to do it was just like, we're just going to try to stop you on defense every time. And let's have the final score of this game be 70, like a 2004 playoff game. The final score will be 74-71, and we're going to contest and switch on everything. This is why you have game 7 at home, because I think if game 7 is in Orlando, I think Orlando wins. So the regular season still matters, Russillo.
still matters. Okoro, too, by the way, with his assignment on Paolo, I thought just worked his ass off.
Did a good job.
And, as much as we all love Paolo, I think there are times where he can kind of get himself stuck because he's so big. He can pass out of any
Yeah.
Like when he picks up his dribble, it's like, okay, well, I can still maybe hit a turnaround. I can still pass out of this. I can see over the top of everybody. But that's kind of what you hope he's going to do. Like, all right, stop yourself, stop your own momentum, and then be 10 feet away and then not really know what you're going to. And there's so many Paolo turnarounds where I'm like, oh, that's probably not the shot you want. And then it goes in that it's hard to get on him too much. But I can't even really even be critical of him despite the overall shooting numbers for tonight because it's like, well, he was the only one doing anything for such large chunks of this game.
Yeah, you needed the one irrational confidence. They even needed like the Max Strus three threes in 5 minutes guy, and they just couldn't.
Anything.
That guy was not on their bench. Let's we're gonna take a break for the podcast and stay on YouTube and come back and talk about what does Orlando do. All right, coming back. See, that's how we do it, folks. All right, so Orlando, big picture. Hey man, 7 game series. We were leading at halftime, feeling great. We're a young team. We have cap space. Like this is a positive year for us. Don't get too shaken by that. The negatives, um, Franz is just not with the offensive game he has now, and he's been in the league now a couple years. I don't think you can comfortably say if we're a title team, he can be the second best guy. Not positive he could be the third best guy. So to me, he's in like where Michael Porter Jr. is on Denver, where you can't be the first or second best guy, and maybe you can't even be the third best guy. But if you're the fourth best guy, that's awesome. And maybe that's who he is. The only thing that would change that is if he shoots a million cajillion threes this summer and at least fixes that a little. But this was all year. He couldn't make a three all year. And I'm starting to wonder maybe that's who this is. A really good slasher guy who teams are going to leave open.
I don't understand it because, as we said in the beginning with his college stats, like I went back and looked at some of the stuff. I'm like, it's actually higher than you would think. He was 35, he was 36, he was 28% from three this year. But after the All Star break, it just fell off. He was just under 19%
Hmm.
after that's like 25 games. There's no way.
And
I
some of
just
those were open.
I just can't fathom that that's who he's going to be this whole time. So the whole first, second, third, clearly he's not a first. They won 47 games this year. So before we start predicting like, hey, can they be in the short list of 4 or 5 teams that win a title? They're not there. I still feel really good about what they've done and that they have somebody in Paolo who has a chance to be one of those players.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
maybe in comparison to like some of these other teams, you could argue they were even ahead of schedule.
If you were them, I mean, Mitchell, now he just beat them, but Mitchell could be one of the guys who's on the market this summer. If he's like, I'm not extending, he's got a year left on his deal. And then teams will be lining up, and everybody seems to think he wants to go to New York. Miami's always looming, but it does feel like Orlando's a possibility for them. There's the Paul George free agent signing possibility. And then there's the Hail Mary of Booker saying, this Sun situation sucks. Get me out of here, which I think is unrealistic. What kind of player would you want for them? Who are you looking for? Who's on your Christmas list for them?
Uh, it has to be. It's funny because I actually think like two Warriors would fit the bill here, where you go,
Oh,
all right, well, could Chris Paul play 20 minutes and unclog some of these? Because what I don't want them to do is I don't want them to bring in somebody so ball dominant that then it takes away from some of Paolo's possessions. Like it's one of the hardest things with all these talented players to be like who overlaps and then who complements with their skill set or really even their mindset of how they want to attack the game. So I think they need some kind of guard that's a little bit more deferential that could still shoot. But I don't know what people think of Chris Paul now at this point, and I don't know if this team would be good enough for him to sign on for less money. And that's why I still think Clay is going to make a lot of money somewhere. And because on top of everything else, he's a great teammate, he's a good dude.
yeah.
And I think despite the Sacramento game in the play-in elimination, he salvaged himself somewhat this season from the lows of him, almost having these open therapy sessions with the media after the game, which is not surprising for somebody like him and his stature to go through everything he went through. So, I mean, we could sit here and say Paul George and maybe, I don't know what Brandon Ingram's availability is going to be, but it has
Well,
to be
Brandon
shooting.
Ingram, I don't think makes sense for this team.
No, not at all. But I'm just for names. I
Yeah.
mean, there are other
I did.
names.
Because I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, Ingram, Franz. Is there something there? And then it's like, well, why would New Orleans want to turn Ingram into Franz? And
Well, they
it's a,
might.
it may, eh. Really?
I think you're being a little hard. Like, if this is who you think Franz is going to be, then I can't win the argument. I
I
just
just
can't.
don't think he has the same. I don't think he has the same stock that Ingram has. Oh yeah, so Rudy points out they have the ability to do the Van Vliet contract with somebody where it's like, whoa,
Right.
2 for 80, and we've been talking about Malik Monk to the Magic for 2 months here, and that's the kind of guy they needed in this series. Or like a Tyler Hero, who I realized during the Celtics series, his destiny is probably he's like White Lou Williams, right? He's like this awesome 6-man scorer guy, but not somebody who's going to be one of your three best guys. But they need like a Monk, like a Hero, somebody who can come in, run the offense, take some shots, be a heat check guy. And those guys are out there. There's a few of those in the league. Feel like they could get one of those dudes. It was the thing their roster was missing this year. Paul George, I said this on Thursday's pod. I went to the Wednesday Clipper Mavs game. You were there too. And they do the starting lineups, and they were like, in his 14th year from whatever, Paul George. And I'm like, whoa, it's gonna be year 15 for him next year. And he's got a metal rod in his leg, and it's like, here's 200 million, Paul George. It's like, do you feel great about that? Because I'm not positive I do, especially if you're Orlando and you have some of the injury history they've had over the years with rich superstars that they've signed. Um, so I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but maybe when Paolo's 21, maybe it's not like a rush. Maybe this is baby steps. They don't have to make their version of the Mitchell trade or the Gobert trade. Take your time.
I was wondering, if this is got bad. And again, I think we probably ask a lot of these same questions depending on how far Cleveland goes. But like, if you were New Orleans, but see
Hmm.
any Mitchell trade,
For Mitchell, I
it,
had I had it written down. I
yeah.
think it's the
But
most logical non-big city team for him.
the Knicks thing doesn't make any sense anymore. And unless he just goes, hey, force me to Brooklyn, and that's the only place I really want to go. And then he controls the transaction more than the teams do. But I can't imagine it's a real long list of teams where he'd be like, yeah, I'll go see how it is in New Orleans, and I'll sign an extension there. I thought David Griffin was really revealing and interesting
Yeah.
during that. That was pretty rare because a lot of teams, I mean, the whole model is set up for all of these players to feel like failures and all these front offices to go like, I guess we didn't really do it. But part of what he was talking about, where he's like, "Hey, for a certain stretch, we had the best net rating," and like I was like, "Come on!" Like
Yeah.
because I think you can take these snapshots of seasons where you can talk yourself into your team being like at this level that it's not really at. And this year's incredibly frustrating because of the way Zion goes out in that playing game against the Lakers. But then for him to say, like, I think we've seen this group enough that we can't come back, and then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, all right, well,
Because
let's
we agree. We
let's
agree, David
party.
Griffin. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was very honest and revealing once he kind of built to the point of, saying the stuff that they did well and that he was proud of. Because I think there's a version of that Pelicans thing where it ends a little bit better. If they had Zion to close, I wouldn't have picked him against OKC even with healthy Zion. But that feels like the team, but it's never been a destination. It's nobody's ever gone, hey, I want to go there.
Yeah. And especially you're signing up for a basketball situation because I assume Ingram would have to be in that trade and maybe even McCollum with Mitchell and picks. And now your future is tied to whether Zion decides whether he wants to be in shape or not. But the problem for Mitchell is he wants to be in New York, and I just don't see how Brunson and Mitchell make sense. I've argued with Knick fan friends about we already talked about Mitchell trades. Meanwhile, he had 89 points in a game 6 and a game 7. And you could have made jokes about his suitcases were packed at halftime. He was ready to
Sure.
go, but he really wanted to win that game. And I thought like even that the stuff they showed on the sidelines with him trying to get Garland going, like that was some of the best leader stuff I've seen from him in a game. Like he really took that game on, didn't want the season end. So that made me think like, well, maybe Cleveland is the best situation for him. He goes to Brooklyn. Who's he playing with? I mean, Bridges has to be in that trade. So now it's just, hey, it's Donovan Mitchell and a bunch of ninth men. He goes to the Knicks with what's happened with Brunson. I don't know if I mess with the Brunson thing. And like, here's another ball dominant guy. Like you just compared Mitchell in an unironic way to like there's a little Westbrook in him, which I didn't disagree with. I don't know how you put that with Brunson. So then you start thinking about Miami, you start thinking about Lakers. What if LeBron's like draft Bronny? I want to come home. But New Orleans, from a basketball sense, might make the second most sense. I think Cleveland makes the most basketball sense for him.
Yeah. That's if I'm just not sure as much as I like both of them. whenever I was watching Atlanta this year, I'd be like, man, it just feels like Trey and DeJounte don't really play basketball together. Like they
Yeah.
stagger their minutes, and when they do play the game together, it feels just very taking turns ish. Like it doesn't really feel like they're ever playing ball together. And I think it's been a little bit better at times with Garland and Mitchell, but it kind of gets back to the original point of like what I would want Orlando to have, and that's somebody that's complementary to Paolo and not somebody that's overlapping. And
Well, it would be
it's
two
just so
guys, right?
hard.
Not just one.
No, but I mean, just like in Mitchell and Garland, you go, okay, cool. I have two guys who can shoot, two guys who can handle, two guys who can play make, and two guys that can drive and get to the hoop, especially with Mitchell.
Yeah.
Like that's his greatest skill of like, if I really, really need to get to the hoop in some of these stretches. And we saw that so much in the last two games from him, which is just really special to be able to do that in the playoffs. And we've seen him do it before. But then I look at Brunson, and I'm telling you, like, I love this Knicks team. This is
Yeah,
one
me
of
too.
my favorite teams in years. But then
Hmm.
I'm honest with myself and go, okay, but like, what do you actually think they're capable of? Can
Well,
you?
the Cav that makes sense on that team is actually Jared Allen. If you're gonna like pick a Cav that could make everything that we like about this Knicks team better, you take Jared Allen.
I think Jared Allen works on a ton of different teams, and I'm sure Cavs
Me
fans
too.
are losing it right now as they just won Game 7, and we're talking about potential trades.
We've
But
traded
right,
nine Cavs.
because we maybe we just the rules are we shouldn't be doing this. But I think it speaks more to the Brunson point and all the Mitchell rumors and like how important today was. But again, may have just delayed all of the stuff that we're doing anyway. I don't want to mess with Brunson, but I also
Yeah.
don't know if you can survive through, say, 3 playoff rounds with that being your offense and him taking like 30 shots a game. It's
Yeah.
awesome, but can you actually do that? I don't know. I don't think the history doesn't tell you this works.
Well, we're about to find out over the next two rounds. I had a thing written down. It's a borderline. I'd tell Kyle to turn the TikTok camera on, but we have the YouTube camera on. Who was Boston rooting for in that game?
Probably Cleveland.
I think so too, which is weird because they proved they were better than Orlando. But I think if the goal is like, don't put a lot of miles on us in round two, um, try, don't just get in a weird basketball situation that's unconventional. Orlando is kind of a funky matchup for them. They a lot of defenders to throw at different guys in the Celts to kind of get in their heads to muck it up. I didn't want to muck it up series for them in round two. I want them to keep the flow they have. In Cleveland, they'll have a better flow. Mitchell will win one game, but Boston, they should have swept the series with them this year, except for the Dean Wade game. Dean Wade came in, left his body. Hopefully, I don't know if he's coming back for round two. Maybe I'd be a little more nervous, but I felt the same way. I was like, I'm actually a little more nervous of Orlando in this next round than Cleveland. Does that sound insane though? Like, you think people are listening to this going, that's nuts? Cleveland just won the series. Mitchell is the best player on either team.
Wait, you think Mitchell's better than anyone in this series, not better than
Better
anyone in
than
Boston,
better
right?
than Palo. Yeah, no, I'm
Right.
talking about Mitchell
Okay.
versus Palo.
Just double checking. That's what I thought
Yeah.
because halfway through I was like, I think he meant this series. It's just the length. It's just the length defensive thing. I think sometimes defense with Boston, they can get into some bad habits offensively.
Right. And
That's
Orlando
all.
could muck that up. With that said, after watching Mosley play 10 guys and then put Jonathan Isaac on ice in the fourth quarter, now retroactively, I'm like, oh, I wish we'd gotten Orlando. That would have been, I wish we'd gone against watching Franz go 1 for 25 in a game seven. Orlando probably would have been a better pick.
I don't think it's a definitive answer. Like
It's not. They're going to beat either team.
They should be able to, like, if they're this good and as good as they looked through the 4 games against Miami, like that series ended up playing out the way that it should have with the one blip historic 3-point shooting game
Yeah.
where it's not like it went 6 tough games and you're like, what the hell are they doing this again?
Right. They
I
killed
mean,
them 4 times
they,
and then
they should
lost a random game
right.
too.
They should still be dramatically better than either of the two teams that played today.
Some of the stuff Mitchell was doing in this game, I was trying to think of other guards that I've seen, and the only other guy I could think of was Dwayne Wade, like late 2000s. These guards that are not huge guys, but are super physical and have a way of going to the basket the same way like somebody like Embiid would or LeBron would, but they're small and how they use their body and protect the ball and bounce off dudes and are just constantly guys are sprawling backwards, and you're like, was that an offensive foul? What happened on that? And they'll show the replay, and it's like, man, it feels like he just muscled that guy backwards and then just gets this weird layup. I don't think I've seen a lot of guards in my life that have some of the moves that he has. And it's weird. It comes and goes because sometimes he seems super happy to just take 25 footers and not play that way. And then other times when he plays that way, it's like, oh shit, how do you stop this? I think you stop it with length, which is why I wanted them to put Isaac on him. But um, who else is like him to you?
Darren Williams used to be just really good at creating all
Mm,
side, all like he used to have this crossover that was nasty, but then he also would just go right at you, like get his shoulder into your chest,
right.
and he would create. Now, look, I think Mitchell's probably a little quicker than Darren Williams is, but peak Darren Williams, I mean, you'd probably argue he's even better than Mitchell. He was just so nasty and he was so physical, even though you thought of him probably more as a prototypical, not prototypical, but he just felt a little bit more point guardy ish than maybe
Right.
Mitchell does. But my favorite thing from Mitchell was just, hey, you go through enough of these games, you've got a little bit of a playoff resume. It's not like amazing for Mitchell as far as the lack of distance that he's gone with other teams that he's been with, but just seeing like, hey, you know what's screwing us up on offense is when we wait around, when we let Orlando get settled again off the first thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
When and that was maybe part of the Boston answer where it's like when Boston gets a little clogged, they can just kind of stand there. And then it's like, okay, but you're making it easier for the defense. And Mitchell, it felt like the light went off with him, was like, stop waiting. Stop waiting. It's like, as soon as you come off the screen, go. As soon as you have the ball, go. As soon as somebody thinks they're coming up, like make a decision there. And some of these guys that are so good in the regular season, it almost takes them like a bit of a wake up call, being like, oh, I guess I can't just like screw around and wait to do something offensively because they're right
Right.
on top of me.
Well, I thought that was Minnesota yesterday to some degree. That
Big time.
they were playing with a pace. And I can't wait to talk about that series. But for the Celtics to win this series the way that they should, I think they're gonna need Tatum and Brown to guard Mitchell. Because people haven't seen the Celtics that much, but like, oh, they'll just put White and Drew on Mitchell. And it's actually not what they do sometimes. Sometimes they like to throw the forwards with Link at the guard. And then they use the guards like to either guard 3-point shooters and then help off. And um it would be interesting if Tatum was like, let me take Mitchell out this series. I don't think he would do it because I think he'd want to match. There's some ego stuff. Like, no, I'll match him on our end. But I like sometimes and they've done this a few times this season when Tatum's like, let me take that guy out. We have enough offense. I'll be the one that guards him. And Jalen will do the same thing every once in a while. They have so many guys to throw at him that it's going to have to be somebody else. I think that chips in with the Cavs. It can't be like tonight. It's going to like Garland's going to have to show up, or Mobley's going to have to start putting together the 2015s, or Strus is going to have to hit more threes. Strus, a semi Boston killer. I'm not giving him total Boston killer status, but he had a couple moments against them.
I don't blame you for ever being horrified by everybody that was involved with that team last year, but
Yeah.
that's the advantage Boston should have with a team that feels like there's the one guy, unless Garland gets the shooting going again. And he just needs to be more aggressive shooting. I think he's good enough to be better than he was this past season, or series, I should say. But if you're trying to just screen into Horford all the time, like the two people are just going to stay with Mitchell constantly, because if Allen isn't back, like Allen provides maybe a little bit more spacing than Mobley does. And I know that doesn't necessarily sound right because Mobley's still supposedly going to shoot from the outside, but you would just leave whoever the big guy is setting that screen. You're probably not going
Yeah.
to close.
Good
You're going to
luck.
go, you're going to say, go ahead, like make
Yeah.
your first three shots and we're going to do it a fourth time and ignore you.
Right. Feel free to make 16 20-footers in this game. What do you think the line of the series is on FanDuel? Celtics Cavs.
Uh, Boston minus 500.
Boston minus 1600. The
Oh my
Cavs are
God.
plus 820 underdogs. This is without Porzingis. Celtics in 4 is plus 185. Celtics in 5 is plus 175. Celtics in 6 is plus 470. The last time the Cavs won a playoff series was 2018, game 7. The weekend of bricks, Rockets, Warriors, and Cavs Celtics game 7s, when they combined for 275 missed threes between the two teams. Just a parade, a barrage of bricks. So now it's back, Cleveland and Boston. We'll see how that goes. Let's take one more break for the podcast, and then we'll come back on YouTube and we'll talk about our guy, Anthony Edwards. Okay, did I hit everything? I did. All right, we're coming back. So Minnesota, Denver. I was looking up where do you want to start with Minnesota, Denver? I'll let you lead because I know like that level of basketball yesterday was, and I saw you last night because we went to go see Shane Gillis, but we were both on a high after game one, Minnesota, Denver. Just about as good of a playoff basketball game one as you're gonna get in a series.
Yeah, I almost said no to Gillis just because I was like, can I emotionally pivot that quickly after, like, I was kind of thinking about where I would be during the day. And I was like, well, I cannot believe this is a second round series. I can't believe we're this lucky.
Yeah.
I think I would start with the defense, kind of like what we talked about there a little bit in the beginning. And it's a lot of like where Phoenix is like, are you serious? Like Booker with Jaden McDaniels going like, wait, like
You can do this the whole game?
this is what we're gonna do. Like I'm not even at half court yet, and I'm worried
Yeah.
about getting it over. And you saw that with Murray, and Murray had another slow start, although, that wasn't the biggest problem. When they were up 18-4, I'm like, okay, well, Denver isn't going to get it run off the floor. And that wasn't the case. Ant, the cat stretch, the Nas stretch, like there was a lot of really good things in there. I think the alarming thing, if you were Denver and you watched the film from it, is you're like, man, they got good looks the whole time.
And Denver did not.
No.
Denver worked really hard. Hey, my biggest fear for Denver in this series, and I'm rooting for Denver because I just like Jokic and I like Denver and I like when teams try to go back to back. But I'm also rooting for Minnesota because I have a pretty large Celtics Timberwolves finals bet at 16-1. So I was kind of like back and forth, couldn't decide where I was going. But the thing that alarmed me for Denver was I was like, man, there's a recipe where they're just throwing these big guys at Jokic and they're just making him work the whole game. And it's just 2.5 hours of just not fun to be Jokic in this game. There's that. But then there's like the McDaniels, Edwards, just them taking turns on Murray and just making his life miserable. And if those two things are happening simultaneously, what else is going on for Denver? And that entire game one was just, if Minnesota's going to play defense like this, and then they're getting the Ant piece on the other end, and he's going to be able to rise to that level offensively, Denver can't beat them. The question is, can Ant do that again? Is that who he is, or did he have a really good game? Because if he's there or close, Minnesota's going to win the series.
I picked Minnesota. It was a coin toss for me because I didn't really like picking against Denver, especially him having the home court. And when the Gobert Towns thing works, it's Gobert just swallowing up Gordon. And then he's left to roam off of Gordon because if Gordon tries to stretch the floor by sitting in the corners, that Gobert's just not going to pay attention to him.
Yeah.
But then you have the Towns foul piece where, I mean, you had a tweet on this the other week, and I don't know that it got enough credit. His foul habits are atrocious.
Yeah.
And he just decides to get these awful. He had two in like a minute when he came back in yesterday. We were like, do you not want to play today? I actually was wondering if Mike Onori, who was in for Finch, but I'm sure it's really Finch's call because he's sitting there right on the bench. But when Nas was so good, I was like, do you actually go back to Towns? Because
we talked about this last night. They
Yeah.
put Towns in with like 2 minutes left, and it was like, we kind of know
Why
we're
do you
going to
think
win the game
Why do you think they did that?
because they didn't want it to be a story after the game that Towns was benched for the last 7 minutes. There's no other reason. Nas was the second best guy they had in the second half of that game. You're not taking him out. They had to take it out you could lose Towns potentially if you're just sitting him for the last 7, 8 minutes. That was why they did it.
I think you're right. So if Towns gets in a foul trouble, then I'd think like, okay, so that means Rudy has to play Jokic straight up. And if you look at Jokic when he has just Rudy, he goes right out. He doesn't really have that much fear of him at all. I wouldn't say it's as excited as he gets when Rui was on him in the first round, where it was like, oh my God,
Right.
give me the ball, give me the ball. I'm actually not going to pass here. He has no concern because I think he always thinks he can the problem is if it's Towns and then Rudy helping off of Gordon, I mean, 11 of 25 and 2 from 9 from three. I mean, Jokic took 9 threes in that game because he'll also like have moments where he's like, all right, I got to get going. I got to start taking tougher shots here. So I don't know that you're going to get that from Jokic again.
But you
But
left out the Nas's
no,
defense part because that was
that's
the
the
other
whole
piece of this.
right.
Yeah.
That's the point that I'm getting to is like when Towns gets into foul trouble, then you start thinking, oh, then it's Rudy straight up on him. And it's like, well, yeah, but they have this Nas piece against a Denver team that doesn't have
Yeah.
another big they feel good about playing.
Well, and then the other way they were using Nas, and I listen, this, if I ever get hit by a bus and they're like, what are the things you truly cared about? And list like 12 things. I really want one of them to be, if the other team isn't using their point guard to bring up the ball, just pressure them 94 feet. Because Minnesota went in this game and it's like, if Jokic is going to bring the ball up, we're going to fucking make him work. Where like Nas was picking him up at the top of the 3-point line on the other, on their side of the court and just hounding him, pushing him. And I thought they did something. I watched a ton of Jokic. That was the first time I've seen a team speed him up where he was playing at a speed that I felt like was 10% faster than maybe he was happy about. And they managed to do it and they got him where he just I never felt like he was totally in control of the game. His stats were fine. But in terms of like the typical Jokic Maestro thing, now part of it, this is why game 2 is going to be so interesting. You're coming off a Lakers game where, you know, they had just figured out the Lakers and when they really needed to score on them and who to attack and who to get into a switch and all that. And he had just figured it out. He controlled the pace. They never pressured him. So he's going to adjust because he's a genius at basketball. But my big thing for game 2 is, can they speed him up like that again? Have you ever seen him? I don't want to say he was frantic, but he just seemed like a little over caffeinated. That's not normally what he's like.
I thought there was stuff around the rim where he just wasn't. I expect everything to go in
I know
around the
that's
rim.
the thing.
Okay. So
Yeah.
like his touch, it's like he's placing the ball up
Yeah.
towards the rim the
We're
same way.
comparing him to the greatest players
right,
ever.
right.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about him at all, but I would agree there were certain things throughout the course of the day where like, oh, that feels a little non-Jokish-y. And Porter continues to have these stretches when the offense around him doesn't really have much going on. I mean, he had some stretches during LA where you're like, that was kind of the game. Murray, he was 6 of 14. His shooting numbers from three were fine. He was only 2 of 4, but he was below 30% against the Lakers. So I don't know how much of the calf thing is there.
Can I do my percentages on him?
Yeah, I love it. 81, 74.
84.
That seems high.
84. It felt like 84% healthy to me. But they were clearly trying to put miles on him that whole game. They were like, this guy's
Watch
not 100%.
McDaniels.
Let's go.
McDaniels had some early opportunities offensively where you're like, all right, that's a make, or, they're turning the ball over. And I'm like, this score should be bigger. Like they should have a bigger lead than they have right now because still some of these looks are really good. And then you have the Ant thing that I can't believe we took this long to get to because it's so much fun. The shot making is absurd, but Pope provides zero resistance to him at all. Like it's not even close. When he has Pope one-on-one,
physically so much bigger than him. Yeah.
There's like, I don't know how that's solved unless it's an effort thing, but Pope, who we like defensively, and you think, hey, that's a nice little option to have out there.
No,
whether it was Pope,
he's a borderline elite defender, I would say.
And
he was just getting demolished. Do you know did you read the backstory on those guys?
With the Georgia background?
Yeah, and like Pope's known him for a while, and it's like a big brother to Ant, and Ant's like, he's my big brother, but I'm gonna fucking destroy him in the series. Like Ant talks the best shit of anyone I think we've had in a while. I want to get to some Ant stuff in a second, but what's big picture for this series? Denver was a minus 205 favorite heading into game 1. Denver is now a plus 108 favorite. Russillo. Denver in 7 was plus 410. 24 hours ago. Now it's plus 350. A Minnesota sweep is down to plus 550. And the reason I bring this up, I know you just made a face.
Well, come on.
No, don't give me the come on. I'm just gonna.
I'm not saying it to you, but
I just want to talk it out for a split second.
It's just so disrespectful to even ask this. Go ahead.
This is why it's going to be good content. I was thinking, because I'm going to do a whole thing about the history of Ant and some of the pool that he's swimming in right now. This T-Wolves team, a little similar, where this team has the look And I don't know if it's legitimate or not, but we've seen it a couple times in the history of the league where it was like the Bulls against the Pistons in 91. You're like, man, they really kind of kicked their ass in game one. What did that mean? The Pistons will come back. And then it's like, they're down 0-2. Well, they're going back to Detroit. It'll be fine. Oh, shit. Are they going to lose game three? And then all of a sudden it's a sweep, right? Same thing with Pistons Lakers, which wasn't a sweep in '04, where, I think the Lakers won game one or game two, and then it went to Detroit. And it's like, the Lakers will steal game four. And it's like, oh, they're getting their asses kicked. Oh, this series is over because the '04 Pistons had the look. And the other one I was thinking was the 14 Spurs when they split the series, the first two with Miami, and it went back to Miami, and then they killed them in game three. And people are like, oh, Miami, lock it down. They're going to win tonight. And I remember going on TV being like, I think there's a chance like San Antonio might have figured this out. And like the series, like the Miami's in real trouble here. And Miami, remember they were down 20 points in every one of those games. This might just be this might just be a great spot for Minnesota, is my point. There are historical examples of a team coming off like a long title run and just running into the wrong buzzsaw at the wrong time. That's a wrong matchup for them when they're a little banged up. And I would be afraid of that if I was a Denver fan. I'm still picking Denver to win in 7, but to me, every possibility is on the board now.
2012 Thunder Lakers is one I thought of
Oh,
with
that's a
that
good one. Yeah.
because I was like, wait, these guys are like giving it to them. They're not even remotely afraid of them at all.
Right.
Like this isn't supposed to happen this soon, and that group ends up making it to the finals. They lost the first two to San Antonio. San Antonio, when I was like, okay, well, they're just not going to be ready enough to beat them, and then they won 4 straight. Where all the things I liked about San Antonio, the athleticism of the Thunder were just overwhelming. As that series goes,
That's a
but
really good example. Thank you for helping my theory. So I
I
don't
just
know
don't
if
like
it's a
it. I
play or
just,
not.
I just, it was the first game. Minnesota hasn't lost a playoff game yet, so I would imagine the vibes are
But that's another
immaculate.
thing that ties into that theory. Like the 91 Bulls, I think they lost 2 games and like one of them was in overtime. If I mean, the bigger thing is if Ant's going to look like that, they're going to win the series. And I went back, I did a little homework. I went back, he scored 36 in his first playoff game ever. MJ scored 30 plus in his second playoff game ever. Kobe, it wasn't until his 30th playoff game. He was younger. Wade, 14th playoff game. He scored 41 in his 8th playoff game ever, which is better than everyone but MJ. His last 3 games, 39.7 points for a 3-game stretch. He's 22 years old. And you go back, MJ, his 3 Boston games, he was 23, 43.7. Kobe, when he had that 48 pointer against Sacramento, which is like one of the great YouTube games. That's like, if you're going to make the case for the 2001 Lakers as the best team of all time, like the game 4 of the Sacramento is like, oh, and Shaq was also on this team. But he had 3 in a row and he averaged 43 a game. And Wade was another one where he had little stretches like that, Jerry West. But like the stuff Ant's doing right now, historically, it's a different level. It's not just, oh my God, oh, he looks like MJ. It's like he's doing stuff that the greatest 2 guards of all time were doing at this point of their careers when it seemed early, but it wasn't. And that's what to me, the ceiling is now even higher because of just what his last 3 games looked like. The stuff he was doing yesterday to Caldwell Pope was like kind of post baseball MJ stuff and late 2000s Kobe stuff and mid 2000s Wade stuff, like some sort of combination of all of that, where like the young athlete stuff, but also like this wherewithal of how to back somebody down, shoot these beautiful turnarounds. It's fucking crazy. Like for a 22-year-old to do that is fucking crazy. And if I'm Denver, I'm terrified right now.
Yeah, that might just be the part of like all of this where when I was trying to figure out, and I changed my mind a bunch leading up to game one. And even though game one played out the way it does, I'm like sitting here like victory lapping, like, all right, yep, I picked the Timberwolves like because I knew it. But
Yeah.
whenever I think about all the different things that could or couldn't happen in the series, like I can't get past the fact I'm like, maybe Ant is just as special. I mean, we obviously love him. We've talked him up. It's usually not how this works. There was a number that Goldsberry had the other day, players that have scored 35 plus in 3 straight playoff games at 22 or younger. It's Kareem, Kobe, LeBron, and Ant. Like,
Yeah.
what if this is just the beginning and like he gets one of these early. They get out of the West. Like he might just be that good, and that might be the simple reason. Instead of like, okay, well, it means that they had, look, all these other parts of it are certainly important if they're going to knock off a team as good as Denver. But there's always like I'll spend all this time looking at it like, hey, maybe just Ant is that sick. Maybe he's
I
just
looked
that sick.
up
It doesn't matter.
stat. Shout out to Basketball Reference. I looked up on StatHead, 23 and under, 28 points or more, 45% field goal or more, and just who's on the list. And it's like all the greatest players, you know. It's Durant's 2012, which by the way was incredible that season, which you mentioned earlier. It's Kobe in 2001. It's Luka in 22. It's Jerry West at 1962. Kareem's first year. Bob McAdoo. It just goes on and on. And Ant has two because last year he did it too. He's just Michael Jordan, Oscar. Like this is a different pool he's swimming in, to use the pool analogy again. But
And the shot looking this good this early. I mean, he was under 30% from three from college. The team wasn't any good. So you couldn't, I had a hard time with it with him where I was like, is he taking bad shots, which is part of it? Like the team wasn't
yeah,
very good, but there was just a lot of bad decisions. He's really raw. He's a super athlete. He's got the ball a ton. And you're on like, all right, well, is he going to turn to this? And then he just physically, pretty quickly, you would watch him in the NBA. Like now he's next to NBA guys. You're like, that guy looks like the most impressive person out there of the 10 guys running
yeah, he
around.
just looks so athletically easy for him sometimes.
So,
That play when he
especially
went full court lefty
yeah.
in the fourth quarter, when it seemed like they wanted a foul, but they weren't sure. And Ant just went 94 feet left-handed for a layup. And it just looked like he was a high schooler in an eighth grade basketball game.
Like think about what he's shown now is that he can drive at his size and get to the hoop. And then once he's at the rim against traffic, he figures out a way with like a little, nobody's Kyrie's finishing package, but there's certain things with him where you're like, is he closed off? Does he have an angle? Yeah, he has an angle. He brought it up and under on this one, or he finished left hand on this one. I say, okay, so no one can really stay in front of him. If you stay even with him, he's probably going to be more physical than you. He's going to be quicker. He's going to be stronger. And then he has all of these things that he can do. He can shoot threes. His playmaking this year is incredible. And now if he wants to slow it down in a playoff game and he gets like the spacing he wants, like he had a play where Jokic was waiting for him in the paint and he may have had Reggie. It might not have been Pope on this one, but you could see the whole time he was trying to find a way to either bring Jokic further out to him for a pass, or if Jokic didn't come completely out to him, he was going to turn to his right shoulder and shoot it on the left side. And like he was seeing it all happen and you could see the play. It was just slow, so it wasn't hard to figure out what he was doing, but he was waiting for like the perfect positioning of where the defense was at. It was like, well, if Jokic stays where he is now, like I don't have a passing lane, so that means the shot's going to be on me. It's a little late in the shot clock. Let me turn and go this way. On top of that, then he plays awesome defense. So there's
awesome defense.
There's nothing about him where you're like, we're getting a 27, 28-year-old package for a guy who's 22 years old. And that's not supposed to happen.
I was looking back because I remembered his rookie year, there was a game and you and I had both just randomly watched it and we were texting each other. It was like, did you see that? Because I went back, I looked at his game log. He was bad for the first 2 months. Like really, that was the coming out of the COVID season, but his stats are bad. And then there's this game, let's say it's like 2/3 of the season against Phoenix. And it was the Suns team that went to the finals. And I think this was the game you and I texted about when he had 42. And it was just something there. And you look at his stats, like he just gets better as that season goes along. And then the last 8 games, he's like 27 a game and he's hitting threes. And just over the course of the year, he jumped. But I remember that Phoenix game being like, there's something unusual about this. And he's since then hit every checkpoint. But then you look at this season, I feel like he's hit checkpoints during this season, even from like, Team USA to the first half of the season to what happened when Towns went out, when he had this extra burden and he was able to deliver, to now what he's been doing in the playoffs. It feels like he's jumped 4 levels since Team USA. And those Team USA guys immediately were like, this is the best guy on our team. Like we were wondering if he was going to get minutes. And this is like, he's the leader of our team. The other thing I love about him, and it really reminds me of early LeBron, because I thought LeBron was like an unbelievable teammate on those early Cleveland teams, like the '07, '08, '09. He was so much fun to see in person. He was so happy. He was so inclusive. Like he was just awesome to watch. And Ant has that same quality, I think, where he's just the hub of all the activity and the energy. And those guys fucking love him. Like they just are completely in on him.
For for a Cat to be mic'd up, and at that one moment in the game, they re-aired the mic'd up stuff, and Cat's going to him, telling him to keep his composure, and for Ant not to just laugh hysterically in Cat's face, I was like, I might vote him for MVP this year. But think about who we're talking. Like, because do you? All right, let me ask it this way, because I've already kind of alluded to it. Do you have moments where you're like, maybe he is this special that he's going to win this whole thing now?
Yeah. I thought of it yesterday. I watched the second half with Tate and we talked about it. And I was just like,
Tate George.
Tate George, Tate Frazier, the Ringer Zone. We sometimes it happens sooner than you're ready, sooner than you think. And that's one of the great things about all of these guys, where we're surprised by the age, but that's really not a good reason to be surprised. You know, like Tiger, it's like, oh, Tiger, it's gonna be so much fun to watch him. I'm not comparing him to Tiger, but when Tiger came in, oh, it'll be so cool if he can compete for a major. And then he fucking won the Masters right away. You know, this is just how it goes sometimes. Guys just come in and they're fucking awesome. Like Gretzky came into the NHL. He's like, I'm gonna take every record. I don't think he's Gretzky, but there are people that have come in. LeBron made the finals in 2007 with like a fucking G League team. You know, like it.
I look, I still think that's one of LeBron's greatest accomplishments of his entire
Durant in
career. Right.
2011 and 12, that like he took that team to the finals. He was slaying dragons every round. We are like, okay, I guess they're ready. So, you know, it's the history of this sport that sometimes guys are early instead of late. Wade, I felt like Wade in '05, I think it would have happened, but he got hurt. Remember that? And then it did happen the next year. But I thought that '05, I thought he was ready to take the title that year. And it was his second year in the league, and it would have been crazy. But it was like, all right, I guess this is happening. So I think it's in
Wade's a good
play.
one. Wade's a good one because we usually don't get the early. But then I was thinking about Ant. I'm like, okay, so he's not going to make first team All NBA. If Embiid had been healthy, like Embiid, MVP, Embiid, Embiid might have won another one. It's like with
Yeah.
Ant finished seventh. Like I don't know where Ant's going to finish. He's not going to finish in the top five at MVP voting, and yet I'll have moments. And it's not just because they won game one. And I'm not going to be shocked if Denver comes back and Jokic figures some things out, and they're terrific. And maybe they have to get a little creative with what they want to do with Ant. And then if Ant gets bottled up, then all of a sudden nobody else is making shots for 2 quarters straight for Minnesota. Like I'm not going to be shocked to see some of that kind of stuff happen, but it would be really just beyond unique of Ant arrives, Minnesota wins a championship. Like it's not supposed to happen this way. And then all the postseason stuff comes in and you go, he wasn't even top five in MVP. And then next year he's going to be the favorite.
Well, the
If those
funny,
things were to happen. I don't know.
yeah, if he wins the title, first of all, if he beats Denver and makes the finals, he becomes the biggest under 30 star in the league. Like that's just like mark it down. And he might be getting may even beating Denver might do that. He's leaving Tatum, all those guys in the dust because he's just different. He's got a charisma to him that casual fans can see. Plus, he delivers over and over again. Plus, he's so fucking fun to watch. There's a world where they just win the title and he goes to Team USA and you have like, oh, it's going to be LeBron and Steph and KD's team. How are those guys going to deal with that? Because I mean, now I almost feel like I'm going to get hit by lightning, but the dream team was like that in '92, where it was like, oh, this is going to be the Bird and Magic, and this is going to be and then MJ just took it, and it became the Michael Jordan dream team featuring Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and all these other guys. It's going to be fascinating if he actually wins the title to watch how then that transpires to the dream team, and LeBron being like, I always knew. I knew from the get go this was going to happen, Fran. I've been telling him.
So here's the like, you didn't have him? Obviously, we all agreed on where Jokic is. No one had him ahead of Luka. I don't think anybody had him. Well,
Because he wasn't.
SGA had the better year.
He wasn't ahead of SGA this year, but
Yeah,
in the playoffs, he's averaging 33 a game and he's fucking demolishing teams. He demolished Phoenix. Like he broke them.
broke him.
And that Denver game was the first time we've seen Denver. The game was tied with 7 minutes left, and they got out executed, and a team had a different energy. But I've been watching hoops long enough that sometimes you can see when a team has the look. And I do think Minnesota has the look. I just don't know if it's going to depend on whether Edwards is ready or not to really just start slaying dragons now. But he did it against Phoenix, and he did it in game one against Denver. And if I'm Denver and I'm thinking, man, they have all this shit to throw at Jokic, it's going to be really hard for him. They have all this shit to throw at Murray. It's going to be really hard on him. Oh, and we don't really have anybody to stop Edwards if he's feeling it. That becomes pretty hard series. They have a game 7 in Denver. They have the pedigree. We've never seen Ant in the situation where now this is really sitting there. Is he going to want it too bad? Like, there's just levels to this that we just haven't seen him in the situation yet. But it checks a lot of boxes, man.
Yeah,
Crazy.
and we haven't even mentioned the other side of it of like how good Dallas looks now and how great OKC looked in the first round too. So like even if he gets through this, it's assuming a lot, but yeah, whatever. I think it's kind of
Well, how
fun.
funny would let's say Minnesota beats Denver and OKC beats Dallas, and now we end up with Minnesota, OKC, Edwards versus SGA, Jalen Williams guarding Edwards, size against no size really at all. Can Chet pull people away from the basket? That's actually a really great basketball series from a nerd standpoint. And then you have these two guys who are the best, other than Luca, the best under 30 guys. But, you know, it's sitting there now for Edwards. And the defensive stuff they were doing in that game, who else has been on that level in this century?
What do
Like
you
oh
mean?
08, the oh 08 Celtics got there, I feel like. The oh
Well,
04 Pistons
that Pistons
definitely.
team
Oh 04
was
Pistons
awesome.
definitely.
All five guys could play any other position. They were
Who
awesome.
else?
I think San Antonio's always been really good defensively. I think some of those switchy Golden State teams are
I
really
was gonna
good.
say the lineup of death I felt like could get there.
Yeah.
And
It's
really
just
just get stops for 4 or 5 minutes in a row.
I just imagine if you're another really good player, whether it was Booker or Murray, they're just, and I know I've already said it, but you're going like, wait, what? Like this is, and just like, okay, could we just get a screen up here with a guard just so I can get an angle to get the ball half court and get it set up? And it's like now Ant's on me, and
Yeah.
now Alexander Walker is on me. Like, and he steps up defensively, and then you're like, okay, finally got past these guys. Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
It's
You
it's
know what
so
Gobert did
impressive.
in that game yesterday that I've never seen in all the
The
times?
2-on-1 retreat thing on the Gordon pass from Jokic.
Yes.
Yeah,
Have you ever seen anyone do that to Jokic before? He
doesn't
was the
happen very
first
often.
guy who guessed it. It was like watching somebody pick off Tom Brady in like '07, just like completely reading some pass play that had worked 100 straight times. And some cornerbacks like, I'm going to bait him and then grab it. I couldn't believe he did it. That was the most shocking moment of the game for me, other than the 19 Edwards plays.
It's so hard because you're sitting there and you're going, all right, I want to come help on the best player in the world. Cat needs my help and I
Yeah.
got to do it, but I've got to still pay attention to Gordon. So I'm sure it's been broken up a few times this year,
I don't
but
remember seeing that.
I don't
What
think
would
it's
you
the
do if
only
you're
time. Go ahead.
I personally don't remember seeing it. What would you do if you're Denver? What would you do with Edwards? Because I don't think Caldwell Pope, I don't know if he's the guy. If Edwards is feeling it, I think you need a different option. I think you start with Pope, but it feels like that's got to be Gordon. And one of the things I was crazy about yesterday was Edwards was making mincemeat out of those guys. Like like borderline ankle breaking shit on multiple Denver dudes and just getting whatever shot he wanted. But I think Gordon is probably the answer that needs stops, right?
I might not use Gordon in the first quarter on him and hope that
Right. I'm
Ant
saying
is
late.
going to, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure Malone would go to it if he feels like it's going to be this bad. I do think there's a pride thing that we always overlook, in that if you're Pope and you're watching a film of this stuff, you're going, all right, like
Yeah. I'm ready. Now it's
okay,
on.
right. I have
Yeah.
to step my effort up. But, Peyton Watson will go out there and lose his mind, but he's just not stout enough for Ant because Ant is quicker than everybody, but he's also stronger than everybody on these perimeter plays. It's, it's like, I'm not saying it's Luka's strength, but imagine like if Luka was also first step quicker than everybody.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. Luka doesn't need to be quicker than he is now because it works all the time. So I think there'll be some pride from Denver defensively. And but even if you were saying, hey, he's just going to send more help or do all these different things, when he hit that crossover pull up to the right side, I was like, there's no scheming against that.
Yeah. That's a wrap. One thing Denver could do, I think, is when they're bringing the ball up, have Jokic running up near Chris Finch, throw the ball over his head, and just have him crash into Chris Finch again. Maybe they just need to take out Chris Finch one more time. Who's the biggest guy they could send crashing into Chris Finch? I felt bad for that dude, man, sitting on the but he was there. I mean, he he just can't get up. Like there had to have been 3 times when he wanted to yell at a ref, right?
Yeah, I
They should give him
imagine.
like a bullhorn. Like, like, "Arr."
Did you hear Barkley? Like he hadn't looked at the Denver roster really in depth, perhaps all year.
Oh God.
And then all of a like if you've never watched it before, you're going, wait a minute, Denver only has one big guy that they play. Like they're
Right.
never going to play somebody else. And then they're like, wait, DeAndre Jordan's on the team.
Yeah,
And then
Dirk was calling for DeAndre.
I think at some point Barkley said Zeke Naji. He's like he's 6'9". He just looked at the heights on the roster and goes like, all right, well he's 6'9". He might be your Finch guy, is what I'm saying.
Oh, you Zeke Naji. Oh, I
Yeah.
like it. Well, here's the thing, Russillo. It's really hard to repeat. It's really hard to have everything go right for 2 straight seasons, regular season playoffs. And I go back to it's so funny that this is playing out this way now, that going back to that Friday night, a game we watched, the Wemby game, when he scored 17 points in 3 minutes, when Devontae Graham, who nobody knew was still in the league, made a couple big shots in that last minute and it swung the seeds. And Denver went from they could have been the 1 seed. They could have played New Orleans with no Zion in round one. They'd be playing Dallas in round two, a team that I think they'd much rather see than this Minnesota team. And that one night might have shifted. And we said it on the podcast that Sunday. Like, wouldn't it be weird if it was one of those years where this random stupid game with these players that we'll never think of again from this season swung the playoffs? But it's in play.
I definitely would have picked him in the opener. I would have picked him against Dallas. And who knows? I mean, could OKC just have so much offense, and with all their switchable wings on defense, would they
Mm.
not get manhandled? Would it be one of those weird bats like 3 out of the 7 games, the Chet thing wasn't a problem, or 4 out of the 7, it wasn't a problem, and whatever, game 7, anything could happen. But the fact that Denver and Minnesota they're playing in a second round
This
matchup.
happens like what, like 3 times, 4 times a decade, where we just get this. Like it happened that one year with Golden State Houston, I think 2019, maybe, when it was the 2 best teams and it
That was
just
second
randomly
round.
was second round. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens and it's weird. I want to save OKC for Dallas for round two. We're gonna end the YouTube stream. We're gonna end part one of the BS podcast. We're gonna thank Kyle Creighton and Steve Cerruti for producing. Unless Cerruti, I don't is Cerruti YouTube capable for this or not? I forgot to bring him in and talk about Orlando. Is he? Oh, he is. All right. Well, before we go, we'll get some. Oh, we can't bring Cerruti in, or we can. Oh, all right. Russillo, let's kill time for a second. Were you worried about Cerruti at all during Game 7?
No, I know he's not thrilled. I know he's not having a good time, but that's what I said at the beginning. If they'd won this series and lost the second round, it's the same questions. So it would have been more fun. You get to be a fan for a couple more weeks, but I don't I don't think the how long the journey went told you a dramatically different version of what this team is with their limitations offensively. Like this is who they've been all year long.
Do we have Cerruti? Oh, 30 more seconds. We have to kill more time, Russillo.
What did you think
What
of
was
Shane
the
Gillis last night?
I thought I thought he had the same pace Minnesota's defense had. It's just marveling watching that dude work the room at a specific speed and not let up for what was it, 45 minutes? It was awesome. This is one of the best stand-up comics I've seen in person.
Yeah, I think he's the best right now. I'm not saying he's The greatest
Yeah,
of all time. That's
Tim or Bill Burr and Chappelle are probably in the three of the final four.
yeah. I mean, I didn't love the Trump and Tucker Carlson stuff, but I thought the rest of it was pretty funny.
Though the oh, we have Cerruti in the frame. Okay,
Frame them
we'll see
up.
how this
What's up?
goes.
You
We're
guys got
framing
me?
it. Yeah. All right, Cerruti, you have 2 minutes. Walk us through your feelings.
It just sucks that we had to go up 18. Like it just I was accepting of losing that game. Anybody who asked me before the game, I was like, I don't know, we'll probably lose, man. This is one of those series where every home team's gonna win. And then you go up 18, you get your hopes up, and then the end of the second quarter just sucked. Because as soon Kevin Clark and I were texting about it, because we're like, cool, it was 18, now it's 10, and they're gonna go on like a 6-0 run in the first quarter or the third quarter, and then it's gonna be a ball game again. And I don't have confidence in our offense, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, I had a chance to hedge at halftime because I had an Orlando series bet at like plus 160 for the series. And they're up 10 at halftime. And it was the easiest hedge possible to just take
Yeah,
Cleveland in the points. And I'm with you that the end of the first half looked a little dicey, but I still thought they were going to win. I don't know why.
I felt terrible at
I
halftime.
was like, their defense and Garland looks like crap. And I should have known. You kind of shot your wad in that first 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean the control that Paulo had in the first, quarter and a half was for a guy in his second year in his first game seven, his first playoff series of his life. That's stupid how good he is. And I don't want to hear about the efficiency. I don't want to hear about the shot selection. Russillo touched on it earlier. He has to do things that are so bad and dumb because he had nothing else going for him. So yeah, when he takes those 15-foot fadeaway jumpers that go in a decent amount of the time, comparatively, to other guys in the league, I'm not even that mad at it. It's just the Franz question is going to be a weird question. I still have faith in him. I don't know. Maybe he can't be a two. Maybe he can. He shot well every single year of his career, and this is the first year he hasn't shot well. He's improved, but the thing is, he's improved everywhere else. He's improved in his 2-point shots. He's improved rebounds, assists, everything else except for the 3-point
Defense.
shooting. So are you going to say that he's just like incapable of being a
No,
player? I would say no. I think the overreaction this summer is going to be nuts, but he's going to have to play in the Olympics again, so he's not going to get a summer off.
lock him in the gym. Russillo, where does Mo Wagner rank on best? I just committed a hard foul and now I'm going to shit talk the guy a little bit, but
He's the
not get a
best.
technical. Is anyone better in the league than him right now?
He's up there. When they had that jump ball, when everybody was freaking out, then he felt left out. So then he just started crushing Levert.
Yeah.
Like he had Levert. It's the first time I'd ever seen a guy try to tell the other guy he couldn't be in the jump circle.
Yeah. I was thinking
I
he's like those guys in pickup who the sorry dude guys who they elbow somebody in the head or they push you for, oh, sorry, dude. He's a sorry dude guy just in the actual NBA, which I
Yeah, or he
think
does
is
something
really
shitty and then
special.
he just has a huge smile on his face
Yeah. Oh man,
afterwards. Like
sorry.
he just has a punch. I love him, but he's like
Is
the
that your
guy who
tooth?
yeah. Oh, my bad, dude. All right, yeah. I love him, but I totally understand why he beat
Right. And then
everyone's
after
least.
the game, he's always like, so you guys, you're in accounting, huh? What are you guys doing mostly? Like he wants to like be friendly with you after he
Yeah.
just beat the shit out of you. And you're like, I don't want to talk to you for real now.
Yeah. I have a torn labrum. Can you leave me
Yeah.
alone?
Yeah. Go.
Are there more Wagner brothers or is it just him?
I think that's it. I don't know if the
Okay.
world can handle more Wagner brothers, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I think two is probably enough. How did you feel about Jamal Mosley breaking down the 10-man rotation and burying Jonathan Isaac?
My only explanation would be I don't have an explanation for the Isaac thing. My only explanation for the 10-man rotation is he's just kind of grasping for straws, seeing if anybody can kind of step up here.
Hmm.
And I mean,
I have
honestly,
an
Fultz
explanation. He made one shot per 20 minutes the last 3 games.
Okay.
it's not great.
That's fair.
Yeah,
Tough
not
for the
great.
modern day Bill Russell. I get it.
He shot it way better than I thought he was going to, especially in the playoffs. Like sometimes he's the big no yes guy from three, and if he could, he was hitting from the corners, but he almost kind of had like a weird green light where I'm like, you're kind of feeling yourself too much offensively here, my man. But I don't
He's
know. I feel
in,
like their roster problems are fixable. Like like we need a Max Strus. That's what we need. I don't know who
yeah.
that guy is, but if we had Max Strus, I would feel incredible going into a series like this.
Jet Howard,
Hey,
Yeah. Didn't
the
you
vibes are
draft
good in
Jet
Jet
Howard?
Howard camp.
Caleb
The vibes are
Houston.
good in Jet Howard camp.
Isaac's a no yes guy, and he's also a oh no guy, but that's
Mm.
with other stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Can we have your summer wish list? Let's hear it. Let's hear it once and for all. Give us gold medal, silver medal and bronze medal for your summer
Well,
wish list. What's gold medal?
I mean, I texted you and Kev and said, what, who do you say no for in the Booker / Donovan Mitchell situation? Like, would you put Franz in that deal? I wouldn't put Suggs in a deal because I think you're right. Something was off with him. I have no worries about Suggs in a playoff series going forward at all.
You
That
wouldn't
guy's
put
awesome.
Suggs in a Booker deal?
Well, no, would you do Franz and Suggs? Like, is that
In picks? Yeah, this is Rudy. What do you do? Are we at
I
the
guess I would.
Magic
I don't know.
Reddit?
I'd really not like to. I'd put Franz in the deal. It's not even realistic. So I hate how I'm talking about this and now everyone's going to get mad at me. But no, I mean, Booker would be great. It's not going to happen. I'm kind of talked myself out of the Paul George thing. I don't think it fits. It's like another kind of similar wing. I think throw the bag at Malik Monk. That's a great call. What's the deal with Donovan Mitchell? And otherwise, I think it's just adding shooting. Like, can you just get guys could you just add like 2 Max Struces, whoever those guys are? And I think they'll be okay. And a point guard. We need a point guard for sure.
What's the maximum offer for Malik Monk for you?
I don't think there is a maximum offer. Whatever it takes to get it done.
So you do
they
like
have the money.
3 for 110 for Malik Monk. You
Sure.
do it.
Because who else are you? You're not signing any other free agents. All you got to do is pay your own guys.
I think I agree with Cerruti because remember when Van Vliet did it, Russillo, when they did that deal, and we were like, Jesus. But you know what? Like, it's good to have Fred Van Vliet on your team. Like, we do the Ringer 100, and he's like the 65th best player in the league. It's like, all right, we had the money. Why not
he
get
feels
that
like
guy?
a plug and play guy. He's exactly what they need. A secondary ball handler can knock down some shots. Doesn't have to, as you guys talked about, doesn't have to take shots away from Paulo. Like, he's the perfect guy.
Yeah, the Houston lesson last summer for me was that I don't know if I'm going to get mad about any free agent contracts with all these teams that are bad that have all this cap space. And look, Orlando's good. They're not bad. It would have been awesome if Van Vliet shot it better for them. But when we saw those contracts, I was like, what are you guys doing? And then, although he was good
Even
for
the
3 years.
Draymond deal. And by the way, all this cap stuff's coming up. But
I'd take Clay too, by the way, speaking of the Warriors. Yeah.
voting on the Ringer top 100 really like changed my perspective on this stuff because it makes you realize, like, in a 30-team league, how few impactful guys there are. It's just you're getting into the 80s and you're trying to talk yourself into, Emmanuel quickly. Is he number 94? And you're like, man, this is crazy. I can't get to 100. So yeah, I think it's worth it. All right, Cerruti, you seem like you're in decent spirits.
Yeah, I'm all right. We'll be good. It's not the end of the. If you told me that we would have lost in 7 games like this, before the season started, I'd snatch your hand off for that. This is a great season for them. I'm happy. It's all right.
Well, I'm glad Mo Wagner, I feel like he would have injured one of the Celtics. So it probably worked out the best for me. I'm probably better off playing Cleveland. All right, we're wrapping up part 1 of YouTube stream. Thanks to Cerruti. Thanks to Kyle Crane. Thanks to Russillo. We are going to put this podcast up immediately. Then part 2, which we're going to tape right now, not on YouTube, is going to go up at midnight tonight, East Coast. Thanks for watching and listening.